A little bit together today. We're learning Yehoshua perek ches, the 8th chapter in Yehoshua. The topic today is the second battle. We'll get to it in a moment. I want to take a moment to thank Jack and Barbara Siegel, who are sponsoring for the Boy Bayom Yortzeit of Chana Rachel Bas Moshe. That is Jack's mother, whose Yortzeit is Boy Bayom. Neshama should have an aliyah and continue to lift the Gan Eden. Be'ezras Hashem, she should be a militzas yosher for you, for Barbara, and for the entire mishpacha. Let us learn a little bit of Torah. So here we go. We're going to jump straight in. This perek is going to be a stunning military victory. In fact, it's probably the first real military victory that we learn of Klal Yisrael, the nation of Israel, succeeding at prosecuting in Jewish history. Up till now, we don't hear too many of the details of any battle, and here we get the full detail, the full scope of this battle. But with that stunning victory comes the complexity of our relationship to the military success, which is going to be how we're going to try to approach this. This is the longest perek we have yet studied from the beginning of Nach. So this is a very long perek. It's 35 psukim long. As we do generally, I'm going to do a quick summary with some of the vital psukim that we're going to focus on. However, I leave for you the references of all the psukim here to go through. It is eye-opening to go through them individually. But let's start at the beginning. So if you remember, we need a little bit of background over here. Up till now, what has happened is the first battle that the nation of Israel has fought is Jericho, on the banks of the Jordan River. They then stay in Gilgal, which is a campment just outside. By the way, the Mishkan is staying there at this point in time. So the Mishkan is temporarily staying around Route 90 in Israel right now. They move up Route 1 as they go into the hills of Jerusalem, and the first city they encounter is a place called Ha'ai. We saw that they actually lost the first battle of Ha'ai. They lost 36 people, and this is an incredible emotional, spiritual disappointment. We saw in the last chapter that HaKadosh Baruch Hu explained that there was a problem, that somebody had taken from the spoils of Jericho, even though Yehoshua had declared everything off limits when it came to the Battle of Jericho. They do a lottery, they find out who this is. It turns out to be a person by the name of Achan, comes a very blue blood family from Yehuda. He is put to death, and now this is where we are. We're about to now start the beginning of the second battle. So this is the second battle, right? The first battle is Jericho, the second battle is Ha'ai, but the first one didn't work out so well. So this is our second battle. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yehoshua, he gives him specific instructions. Here they are. Let's look at the first two psukim just together, just to get a sense of this. Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua, al tirav al techas. Do not fear. Remember, their balloon has been burst. They've just realized that they are in fact vulnerable. Kachim kol am milchama. Take the entire army, v'kum alei ha'ai, and go ascend to the city of Ha'ai. Re'en al sadi b'yodcha es melech Ha'ai, v'esamoi v'esiroi v'esar. So I have now that you've removed the spoils, I'm now going to allow you to access this city and all of its spoils. What you're going to do is you're going to now despoil the city. You're going to be able to take everything. You're going to destroy the city. You can take all the spoils you want, unlike Jericho, and set up a orev. How do you translate the word orev? In this case? Right, so orav is a trap, an ambush of sorts. There's an element of cunning. How would you translate it? Okay, good. So it's an element of ambush, an element of subterfuge, which is being described over here. So what is this? So we go through the next two psukim. We hear the Yehoshua now takes the instructions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which seems somewhat vague, right? Meaning you're going to go to the city, set up an orev, and that's it. What does he actually do? So Yehoshua recruits 30,000 troops. And he brings the troops and he explains to them that there's going to be two stages to the battle. What he does is he sends the larger body of the soldiers behind the city. Miyam. Miyam means in the direction of, what's Yam? The sea, which is west. In Israel, that's always west, towards the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so they go to the west of the city and they set up their troops there. In the meantime, Yehoshua then takes a group of 5,000 troops. So it's not clear if they are 5,000 of the 30 or it's a separate 5,000. Mefarshim had different applications of this. But nonetheless, and they go and they approach the city from the north. Okay? Now, we're going to get back in a second to why the north. And it goes as follows. Yehoshua tells the first group, which he is part of, as he stays there that night, they're the Vayolan Ba'emek. They're staying in the valley, that's to the north of the city. They approach the city by daylight, and they wait They wait on the outskirts of this walled city. Ha'ai, it was a walled city. the king and all his soldiers see the nation of Israel. They bring out their troops, and Israel, as opposed to engaging, starts fleeing like they fled the first time. Remember, the first time they fled in battle, so they flee the second time in battle from the people of Ai, which creates a great uproar among the Ai inhabitants, who send out every last soldier after the nation of Israel, charging north to follow them down the hill. And as that happens, Yehoshua then raises his spear. So we hear that it's in Pasuk Yud Ches. Take a look at the top of the next page. At this point, Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua Natei bakidon asher b'yodcha el ha'ai. Raise your spear. So Yehoshua is in the first party attacking the city. Raise your spear facing the city of Ai. Ki b'yodcha etnena, I'm giving it in your hands. Vayed Yehoshua bakidon asher b'yodoi es ha'ir. And he lifts his spear. So as he's being pursued, he lifts his spear facing the city of Ai. The second party, which had been sent first, the 30,000 soldiers who are now hiding in the west, now see the sign and attack the city, which is left defenseless because all the soldiers have abandoned in pursuit of the first group. And they capture it. And they light the city in flames. So now what happens, you can imagine what happens next. So now the pursuers, the Canaanite pursuers, turn around. They turn looking back to the south, and they see smoke arising from the city of Ai. And they were deflated. They were so shocked. They didn't realize that there was another group. And then the 5,000 turn around. And now the pursued become the pursuer. And they turn. There's a convergence now against the troops of all the troops of Ai as the city is being destroyed, and as the Israelite troops turn around and now catch them in the sandwich in the middle. And at this point in time, they're helpless. They're caught unawares. They don't have the protection of their city. They're no longer in a walled city. The soldiers are eradicated, and we're told that it is an absolute victory, meaning to say there was not a single refugee. Right? So every single person was killed. We're going to deal with this from a we'll call the moral perspective, which may be an anachronistic moral perspective. We're going to have to deal with it in the next 2 weeks as to what is the procedure of dealing with women and children when it comes to these things. But for all intents and purposes right now in Ai, 12,000 inhabitants are eradicated at this point in time. There's not a single remaining person. They only save the king, and they bring the king in captives, and we see the following in Pasuk Chavav, Yehoshua lo yeshiv yodai asher natav kidon asher echrim el kol Yehoshua. Yehoshua stands on the hill with his spear pointing towards the city until the entire battle has been completed, and then they take the captives and they burn down the city. There's in Chavtes, there's Melech Ai Tala ala Eitz ad Eisa Erev. They hang to death the king of Ai on a tree until the evening. They take down the body of the king of Ai. They place him at the entrance of the city, and they put a large mound of stones on his grave as a sign of destruction, as a sign of complete victory on the city called Ai. At the end of the perek, we have these 6 psukim, which now describe what we've already actually studied a little bit beforehand, which is the establishment of the stones and the mizbeach on Har Eval, and the curses and the blessings, that whole ceremony, which we studied a few weeks ago when we were discussing when did this actually occur. Did this occur earlier on the day one, and this is not out of chronological sequence, or did they only do it now they have access to the heartland, which makes a lot of sense, because if you look at the heartland, they're now at Ai. So Har Eval is around Shechem. So this is where Har Eval is in the north. So now they have access to it because of the conquest of Ai. So it makes sense this belongs in this specific place. Okay, this is our perek. A lot of things to think about. So let's just do a quick geographical background for a moment, because just to understand what's really happening over here, there's a lot that's afoot. So just a reminder that if you look on even like Google Maps today, as an example, they still have the wrong location for Ai. Okay? So we discussed this last time, that if you look at this map that I put on page 3, It says Kirbet, which means Churvat, the destruction of. It's a destroyed city of Tel Ai. Over there, that area on a little mountain is called Kirbet. There was a destroyed city which rests upon a mountain just by Dair Dibwan. Dibwan is an Arab town which is just across the street from Baitin, which makes sense because Baitin is Beit El, right? The Jewish settlement called Beit El is just a little further to the north. You can see on the map there, Beit El, that's where the large Jewish settlement, major yeshivas, schools, a huge yeshuv there, Beit El, but it's next to Baitin, which is the biblical Beit El. In fact, it means the same thing. Arabic, that's what Baitin means. Okay, so we had seen that in 1935, just a quick recap, we saw that a French Jewish archaeologist had done the research. She found this large area to the east of Beit El, which she knew therefore must be Ha'ai. She did the research, and after 3 years of research, she could not find a single artifact of destruction from the period they were talking about, 14th century BCE, before Common Era. And she was able to find population beforehand and population afterwards, but the city had not been destroyed. It had been abandoned. There was no indication of there being any burning of the city, and therefore she had a religious crisis, but she wrote the paper ultimately, and we saw her letter to the head of the department in the Hebrew University saying, I don't know if I should publish these results, but essentially it means the biblical narrative is incorrect. And for many, many years, the academic perspective has been that maybe Ha'ai is a fictitious story because, the Battle of Ha'ai, because we don't have the archaeological evidence. And we saw that we looked through the works of Rav Yoel Elitzur, who has an essay on this, and he points out that we have a little bit of humility when it comes to understanding archaeology, and it is true that yes, there is a very large archaeological dig at Kirbet Tel Ai, which is where they assume it is, but that is in fact not Ha'ai for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons we saw last week, just as a quick recap, is that the area of Tel Ai, Kirbet Tel Ai, which is what they call it today, is on top of a little mountain, but its footprint is way bigger than even Givon. We're going to see next perek that in fact we're told that Ai is smaller than Givon, which means that just by the size, it's simply not the right place. So it's very nice you found a destroyed place, an abandoned place that used to be settled, but that's not the right place. In fact, Dr. Elitzur points out that it refers to another place called Beit Avin, which is also referred to in the Psukim. If you go down the hill, so I put a red circle where it is not, that is called Kirbet Tel Ai, that is not the correct place for Ai. If you go down the hill, just to the left, just next to Route 60, there is a green circle, which I placed there, which is just where they have another Kirbet, where they have another destroyed area which matches perfectly what Ha'ai is, for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that it was destroyed in the 14th century BCE by fire. Everything was burnt. All the pottery is glazed twice, which means there was a fire, and the carbon dating of the fire is exactly the time period in Israel entering. It is smaller, which makes sense. It was a walled city, which makes sense. And one interesting factor is it did have gates, and the gates were facing north, which makes a whole lot of sense, because where did Israel stage their decoy operation was from the north. There were 6 gates. They found the way that gates worked in those days was they were circular holes in the stone, and they placed a wooden hinge which moved in the hole. So you can see the holes of the gates facing northwards. So we know that where it is today, even though still academically and geographically they're not caught up yet. But this is on the side of Route 60. You can drive past it. This is where the Ai is, which helps us in a number of ways. Because if you look at the topographical map, which means you see the actual curves of the land, you will notice that there's a valley just to the north of Kirbet, of where Ai is, of the green circle, and that little valley is where Yehoshua and his troops were waiting. It's called Ba'emek, in the valley. So they were visible, but remember, Ai is not on the top of a mountain like the mistaken place. It is actually a little lower. But it still goes down to a valley in the north. But what's fascinating is if you look to the west, there's even a deeper valley. Right, just across Route 60, the biblical highway, you go down to the west, there's a very deep valley, which is where the 30,000 were waiting and are not visible to the place where Ha'ai is, which makes so much sense. So now if we understand what's going on, Force 1 attacks from the north, starts running in pursuit. Why do they attack from the north? The answer is because that's the entrance to the city. That's where anybody would attack a city, is by where the gates are. They run away to back to the north as they're being pursued, and then Yehoshua holds out his his spear, it is likely that Yehoshua is already on the verge of the next valley up. So now the people down in the west can see where Yehoshua is. They now attack and overcome the city of Ai. The people look back and they see the city burning. So everything maps out perfectly to this area which was discovered in the 1990s, just where this is. And again, it takes time. We have to have patience when it comes to biblical archaeology and not the hubris to think that we know everything just because we've discovered one area. So that was what we have over here. Let's go into the perek itself, a few basic points. Now, question number one is the Pesukim make a very big deal about Yehoshua being lon b'seicha am. Yehoshua is staying among the people. To me, this is fascinating because for a number of reasons. The Rashi says the reason is because they're making an early day battle. So Yehoshua needs to make sure to be there to wake everybody up, to make sure that everybody is going to be ready for the battle, and that's why he's there. But then Rashi quotes Chazal, and in the first source on page 3, he says, "Vayon Yehoshua b'leilah ahu b'seicha amek amru Rabbeinu shalon be'umka shel halacha." Yehoshua is residing in the depths of halacha. So meaning, say, amek does not refer to the valley, but providing the depths of halacha, which again seems somewhat. There's a little bit of a heretical voice in the back of our mind which says, "Is that really what the Pesukim are saying?" Right? Meaning, is that really what's being described over here? But if you go to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where this is discussed, you'll remember that before the Battle of Yericho, Yehoshua met a armed visage. Remember, there was just like this armed soldier that he met, which was actually a malach, and it's very unclear what the conversation, the dialogue was between Yehoshua and that malach. He says, "You're with us, or our enemies." And he says, "Atabasi, I've come now." And the Gemara explains that when he says, "Atabasi, I've come now," it says because Yehoshua, you are mevatel ha'am milimud Torah. The Gemara says that there was a prosecution of Yehoshua because even though he was staging a battle in the day, at night time they should have been involved in learning of Torah. I believe that this part of the Gemara is now a amelioration of what happened then. Meaning then in your Yericho, you weren't doing enough Torah at night. Now Yehoshua, the night before battle, what is he doing? He's doing the daf, right? Even though the Gemara hadn't been written, but he's learning halacha. He's learning. The point is that it goes, and you think to yourself, why is this so necessary? I think it's so necessary. It's interesting that in 2014, the Brigadier General who's in charge of the entire Gaza operation in 2014 was a man by the name of Brigadier General Ofer Winter. Do you remember? He spoke in our shul just a while back. In fact, he was in our shul 3 weeks ago on Shabbos. I was catching up with him. Very impressive person. He prosecuted the battle in 2014. If you remember, he was castigated in the newspapers. Why? Because before he sent his troops in, and he is a high-ranking officer. We're not talking. This is not a platoon commander. We're talking about somebody who's in charge of tens of thousands of soldiers. So he sent a letter to the troops saying that before they go to battle, they should say Shema Yisrael, because we're fighting against an enemy who curses and he quotes the Pesukim, curses the works of the living God, which is based on Pesukim in Sefer Devarim. And he was castigated by the liberal media in Israel because this is religious coercion. You're forcing the Jewish soldiers to think about Jewishness before battle, right? And they wouldn't let him go, about forcing these poor soldiers to have to think religiously before battle. And what's fascinating about this is it is important. Religious conviction when it comes to battle is a dangerous thing, right? Because unfortunately, you just get on the wrong boat, and your religious conviction can take you terrible places. But it is important to remember that everybody we're fighting is fighting with religious conviction. Just understand, right? But more, it's not just because of our enemies. The Torah describes that battle is a religious conviction too. And it's important not to forget that, because the only people today left who have any conviction about anything we're fighting for are in fact the religious Zionists who are fighting in the war, because they remember what we're fighting for and why we're doing this. And we're protecting. It's not just our brothers and sisters living in Tel Aviv. There's a bigger picture over here. So it's important that before battle, there needs to also be lon be'umka shel halacha. You need to know what you're doing. And there's times that it's appropriate to attack, and there's times it's not appropriate to attack. It's a very complicated business. And we're being reminded before a stunning military victory, is you need to make sure that the leaders are in fact educated from a halachic perspective. There's ways to do battles, and there's ways not to do battles as well. It's interesting, just on the political side, just a few weeks ago when I saw him in Shul, he was having an hashkama just a few weeks ago. So I said to him, what do you think about the war right now? He said, I'm very disappointed because, I came to Prime Minister Netanyahu and I gave him the plan of battle in October 2023. And I told him what was necessary to do to win this battle within a few days. Because you do the same thing you did to the Egyptian army in 1973. which is you starve them out. You're not starving the people. What you do is you move 2/3 of all the population down to the south of Gaza, you close off the north, and you don't let any aid trucks in, which means the terrorists will only have 30 to 40 days before they all capitulate. But we didn't do that. We sent all the aid trucks in, and the terrorists got all the aid. They're sitting on loot. They're sitting on food for years. There's no way we're going to starve them out. So he said, I don't understand why Israel did not prosecute the battle in the correct way. We could have ended this war months and months ago and avoided all the issues that we're having. They did not accept his plan for whatever reason it was. But the point is like this: he said, she said. It's hard to know what really went on and all the decisions that I'm making, and we should not have to be in the position of making such decisions. But here's a brigadier general. He's saying this is a person who's religiously a person who puts on tefillin every single day. It's important to know Vayolen Yehoshua b'Seicham. You need to also have a Torah basis. It's not just a political navigation tool. It's not just diplomacy. There's also what's right and what's wrong. What's going to be the end. This is part of what I think Rashi is addressing. However, the Ralbag says this is not religious whatsoever. This is morale building. Think about this for a moment. Just before, and they'd sent a whole group of soldiers, and that group of soldiers had been beaten and sent running with their tail between their legs. So now Yehoshua says, you guys are going to be the decoy mission. They're like, thanks, Yehoshua. Right? Right? You're going to run into battle and run away. There's likely going to be casualties. There's likely going to be not so simple. So Yehoshua says, no. I'm going to go with you. Right? In fact, we're going to see when we get to Sefer Shoftim that one of the motto of the officers' training course in Israel is called Pimene Tiru v'ken ta'asu, which means see what I do and follow it. That's the word that Gidon said in Sefer Shoftim, which means see what I'm doing and follow it, as opposed to Egyptian commanders who stay behind in the control tower, issuing commands to their privates. Israeli commanders, you'll see sometimes very high-ranking soldiers who've been killed in Gaza. Right, right, see what I'm doing. Yehoshua is there. In fact, the Ralbag points out, why is it by Emek? Because the Emek is the most dangerous place. They're sitting in the valley just below her eye. Right? That's a very vulnerable position. They're not walled. They're not fortified. They don't have the height. Right? They don't have the high grounds. So at this point in time, they're vulnerable to attack. So Yehoshua says, I'll sleep with you tonight because that is going to be the morale building, says the Ralbag, for the battle tomorrow. Just in terms of understanding what's going on over here. The next thing is, I found really fascinating, and folks, I hope you share my fascination with this, which is Yehoshua has this opportunity where they capture the king of Ai, they hang him, and then they take him down from being hanged. Why do they take him down from being hanged? The answer is because it's a pasuk in the Torah. And I just want to stop for a moment over here and appreciate this. We read the Torah and we learn the Torah and we study it in school and everything, but have we seen the application of the Torah? Nach is the first time you see the Torah in motion, and it's so fascinating. The Torah tells us in Sefer Devarim. I'm about to read it. The Torah tells us, you see a person who's liable, is culpable for being killed, you should hang him. However, do not relieve him remaining hanged on that tree. You need to bury him that same day. The curse of God's, it's a curse, so to speak, of God by leaving him hanging. Rashi says it's like twins, right? Two brothers. One who turns into a no-good, like a bandit, and the other one is a prince. And the bandit ultimately, finally, crosses the wrong person, gets brought to court, is hanged, and everybody walks past and says, look at this, the prince was. So that's, we're made but Tzelem Elokim. A human being is hanging. That's a terrible thing. So we need to take him down. That's what Rashi says. But I'd like to say that for most people forget to read the end of the pasuk, which is, do not impurify your land, which Hashem is giving to you as an inheritance. This is the first time we see this pasuk in action. They find a person culpable of death, the king of Ai. They kill him. They hang him. But they don't impurify the land of God. They take him down before the evening. That is the first time we see the kiyum, the expression of this pasuk. And it's not just a arbitrary din to be found in Nebraska. This is a halacha specific to Israel because of the land being impurified. Here we have it. Is that amazing? Just to see the connection between the theory and the application. This is our first application of this as well. Now, I want to do with you a little exercise. And that is I'd like to compare our battle right now to two other battles. First time we're going to need to do is compare it to the first round of the eye. Ha'ai number 1 and Ha'ai number 2. What differences existed? So the first difference that existed is just the numbers. If you remember, Yehoshua sent spies to Ai, and they said, it's a small town, right? 12,000 people. How many soldiers can they really have? It's not a big deal. Send 2,000-3,000 soldiers. Yehoshua errs on the side of caution. He sends 3,000 soldiers, and they are destroyed. They run back to him. So 3,000 soldiers are sent the first time. Second time, assuming that there's two groups, one is 5,000, one is 30,000, we have 35,000. So Yehoshua sends 10 times the amount of soldiers the second time around. Another detail is that in the first time Yehoshua makes a head-on assault. He sends his soldiers straight to the gate, they get clobbered and they run away. The second time there's this whole subterfuge. There's the people in the valley and there's the spear and right? And by the way, it makes so much sense in the military strategy. If you were to send 3,000 again, they would know something's up. What do? They send 5,000 to head on, because it looks like they're fortifying a little more, but not enough to really win, right? But it looks like they're trying more. That's why it makes sense that they would try again, but they're ultimately running. So it makes all sense. Well, how do you put this all together? So what do we see about over here? It's interesting point over here is that it sounds like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is describing to them when he says Sima Orev, place a ambush. It sounds like Hashem is saying, folks, we're moving away from the model of conquest that you've been seeing up till now, right? We're moving away from the conquest of miracles, which is what happened with Og and Sichon and all other folks on Transjordan. Mm-hmm. We're no longer, I'm asking you to do a little bit of ishtadlus right now. And it's kind of like a parent with a child, right? The parent does everything for their child, and then at a certain point the parent says, listen, I need you to help set the table. I need you to start going out and doing a few errands. I need you to be involved I need you to be a self-standing individual. Hashem says to the people I need you to collaborate with me, so to speak, right? It's not going to be 3,000 people and then the walls are going to fall down like you just saw. It's no longer going to be the situation where you just walk in and everything works out. I need you to be involved with me. And this is an important weaning process. This is the process of the children of Israel learning how to walk, both physically and spiritually. And it comes with its challenges. But that seems to be clearly a difference between battle number 1 and battle number 2 as to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship to this. Now, it's not going to be absolute, because you'll see when it comes to perek Yud, there's going to be some unbelievable miracles that are still to occur, right? So there's some pretty remarkable things still in the wings. But nonetheless, we're seeing a weaning of desert treatment to Israel treatment now. We're moving into a stage where they have to be involved themselves. But there's so let's get to the next thing. Let's now not compare battle number 1 of Ha'ai to battle number 2. Let's compare battle of Ha'ai number 2 to Yericho, to Jericho's battle. Number 1 is the biggest difference is that Yehoshua makes a declaration that the spoils may not be touched, which led to the whole problem with Achan, right? In the first battle of Jericho. But here, when it comes to Ha'ai's second battle, Hashem is explicit. You may take the spoils of the city. Burn it down, but take whatever you want from the city. That's one difference. Another difference is that the battle of Jericho is pretty much miraculous, right? It's a walled city, the walls fall down. In Ha'ai, the walls don't fall down. What happens is the ambush party managed to get into the city when it's not fortified and there's not enough guards to be able to access it and burn it down. That's what seems to be going on here. So how do all these ideas come together? The Malbim says very simple. He says the two actually relate to each other. What does that mean? Why are there no spoils declared in Jericho where spoils are allowed in Ai? Is because the one is miraculous and the one is not miraculous. What does that mean? Think about the logic over here. If the battle is miraculous, it means you weren't doing it. If you're not doing it, you don't have the right to the spoils. That's the way the man understands it. That's remarkable. But when you fight, you have the right to it, which makes so much sense. Think about this as a parent, as an employer, as somebody who's managing other people, right? What do you want so much? You want buy-in. You want your children, you want your employees to drink the same Kool-Aid as you're drinking, right? You want them to care about your business, not just the paycheck. You want somebody who's going to be really living the values but it's so hard. It's so hard. And there's always this balance of regulating them and telling them, thou shall do X, right? As opposed to I want you to believe in this ideal and get there the way you can get there. It's so hard. It's so hard being and the thing about this, Lahavdil, is what Hashem looks at humanity and says, I gave you the instruction manual, I'm trying to get you there, I'm trying to encourage you. But there's always a balance of the personal investment. And the personal investment, I would say, is the spoils, in a sense, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to do so much for you. But then it's not really you, it's just me, right? I'm just the parent. Now what I want you to do is, I want you to be involved, and I want you to take charge, but with that comes also your personal investment. It's got to be good for you too, right? So take the spoils, right? Enjoy the spoils, but I want to see more of you in this, right? And the more you, therefore the more invested you are, the more you're going to be doing this. It's such a fine balance. I always think about this when it comes to the halachos of Shabbos and Yom Tov. There's this notion of what's called chatzi lochem. you're allowed to enjoy Shabbos. And it's not just that the Torah is saying, it's a heter, like okay, nebach, you're a human being, so you have to have a little bit of meat and wine. I think that's precisely, we're educating our bodies, right? We're educating ourselves how to enjoy something is because we enjoy meat and wine, right? So here is the way to have a spiritual enjoyment is to have an investment in it. And so important, in a certain sense, maybe, going back to the idea of Yehoshua's, taking away the spoils, maybe Yehoshua was wrong the first time around, which seems to be the case, because Achan couldn't withstand the temptation of the spoils. That decree was too high a bar for the people. In a certain sense, people do need to have investment. People do need to have their little space, that what's good for them, as well as being Hashem's command. And this is what happens in battle 2 of Ha'ai as well. Which I think is a very important process. This is the weaning process. This is the nation of Israel starting to take its first steps as an independent people, rather than people just protected by Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is not just. But in that protection, also means to say they have not learned how to use their muscles yet. They have not learned how to become independent. Which takes us to our last point, and I think this, to me, is a remarkable point, is this raising of the spear. This is like if you were to take a picture of the perek, the picture of this perek would be this raised spear, the spear above the people. What's the imagery? Like when he does this, why is Yehoshua using this as his image? So there's a number of parallels in Torah which are really important, and it is very clear Yehoshua is using them. The first one is when it comes to the Kriyas Yamsov. Walk with me to these psukim. Listen to this, and now think about what Yehoshua is trying to say to the people. This is in Parashas B'Shalach. We're told, "Vayom Moshe la'am, al tiro yisatzu ru'as yishuas Hashem asher yaseh lochem hayom, ki asher yirisemes mitzrayim hayom lo yisesuvin li'rosam adalam." The people are crying. They're fighting. The Gemara in Sota tells us they're dividing into 4 different groups. People don't know what to do. It's havoc. It's chaos. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Don't worry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take care of everything for you right now. Hashem yilochem lochem v'atem tacharishun. Hashem will fight for you, and you'll be silent." So absolutely no involvement of Israel. Hashem is going to do it all for you right now. We have to figure out what it means stepping into the sea. But that's what the psukim seem to say. Hashem will do everything. So don't call out to me. Just walk in. Take the first steps into the sea, and here we have it. Moshe Rabbeinu, raise your staff. And when you raise your staff, what will happen? The sea will split. And that's going to be, and in fact, like in this battle, where Yehoshua's spear remains raised the entire battle, Moshe Rabbeinu's hand remains raised for the process of Kriyas Yamsuf, and it describes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu surrounds them, the cloud which was behind them now goes in front of them, and now they start moving through the sea. This is clearly one of the images which is being described over here. Now, when thinking about this, what is different about what's happening with Yehoshua is when Yehoshua raises his staff, it's first of all not a staff, it's a military implement, right? It's a spear which already is a shift. But in a sense, it's not now HaKadosh Baruch Hu yilachem lachem v'atem tacharishun. It's the opposite. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu will fight for you if you're willing to fight, because you need to do the orev, right? And there's going to be a convergence over here. There's going to be a surrounding, but in this case, it's you doing the surrounding. You are going to be people surrounding the enemy. It's the opposite, right? Or rather than being ensconced in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nature and protected from your enemy from behind you, you're now going to be the ones actively involved in this miracle. It's clear that Yehoshua over here this is almost like a reflection, a shadow of what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing, but now the tools have changed as they're moving to this next stage, which leads us to our next parallel. And it actually appears the first time Yehoshua appears in the entire Torah, and that is in Parashas B'Shalach at the end. Take a look with me in our sixth source. It says, "Vayas Yehoshua kasher Amar lo Moshe li'alochem b'Amalek u'Moshe v'Aaron v'Chur alu Rosh HaGiva." Yehoshua is first described in the Torah as a military leader. Right? The first time we meet him is as the military leader of the nation of Israel fighting the first war against Amalek. Right? And so Yeshua is fighting in the valley. And what happens? When Moshe Rabbeinu's hands remained high, then the nation of Israel won. When his hands were lower because he was getting tired, then Amalek was winning. And that's why Aaron and Chur, Tamchu biyadav, they supported his hands. Clearly, this is another parallel that Yeshua is doing over here. Is the raised hand is clearly related to the battle. By the way, why is this? The Chizkuni says, it's an amazing thing. Look at the second line of the Chizkuni in source 7. He says, Shekain derech anshe milchama. This is the way of in war. Echad migiboreihem. One of the officers, one of the high-ups, made b'makom gavoya, stands in a high place, degel biyadoi, and he holds a degel, a flag in his hands. ולפי שכל האנשים היוצאים עמו למלחמה נושאים ונושאים עיניהם לדגל כל זמן שהוא עומד במעמדו נושאים לב לחזק לקראת המלחמה. When they look up, they see the flag of their banner, the banner of their nation, and they say, we're going to keep fighting. But when the banner goes down, they know they've lost. When I was young, my grandmother once got me a book called The Eagle of the Ninth. It's a story about the 9th Legion of the Roman army, which got decimated in Gaul, in northern England. And it's just a description of a small party trying to go out to recover the honor of the 9th, which is the eagle, the golden eagle of the Roman legion. Every legion had its own eagle, and the eagle of the 9th was the retrieval of that eagle. The Lahavdil. In battle, says the Chizkuni, this is the Chizkuni in Parshas B'Shalach, that's how it works. When you see your banner, that's when you win the battle. When your banner goes down, it goes down too. And he says that's what was happening with the hands of Moshe. And says the Chizkuni, and that's what was happening with the spear of Yehoshua. The Chizkuni directly says in the first line over here. But I like to make the observation. So in one sense, it's a military strategy, right? You look up, you see it. But the Mishnah tells us in Rosh Hashanah, for those of us learning Mishnah Rosh Hashanah because we're right that season, the Mishnah tells us about this particular incident, and this is where we get to our point. The Mishnah says, do the hands of Moshe control the military? He says, when they would look up to their Father in heaven, they would raise their eyes heavenwards, that's when they would succeed. So on the one hand, it's amazing. It's the military banner, right? And yet it's also not the military banner, it's the spiritual banner at the same time, which comes down to the very same word. What is the word for a banner in Hebrew? Nace. It's a nace, which is precisely the word that we're struggling with right now. Because what's the point? Is this a miraculous battle? The answer is there's a nace, but it's not a miracle. It's a banner. And what's the banner supposed to be doing is raising our heads to heaven. But the implement in this case is no longer the staff, it's the spear. So on the one hand, you need to be involved, but don't forget when you get involved in military that Hashem's running this battle. It's the very, very fine line that the nation of Israel has. Because on the one hand, if it is all miracle, they all trust in Hashem, but they can't walk. They're not doing anything. If it's all military, then they forget Hashem. Kosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to try to tread that tightrope. I'm going to show you. You need to be involved, but you need to keep looking up. And that's what's happening over here. This is going to be the model for all Israel battles in the future. It's so important to appreciate the balance. Think about a parent trying to educate their children, trying to get their children to walk, and yet at the same time remember them. Remember where they came from. That's what's happening over here in this fertile battle of Ahai. And I'd like to close off with the following observation. It makes sense that this battle of Ahai has to be the second battle in Israel. Why is that? Why of all the places they choose us to answer, it sounds like as they're entering the heartland. This is the gateway to the heartland, which allows them to go to Hareval. However, I'm sure we all know the reason why they already went there. Because all you need to do is open up the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, folks. And let's read the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha. Because we had a forefather whose name was Avram and Sarai, and they came into the land of Israel, the land of Canaan at the time. And here's what we're told about them. Listen to what we're told. We're told, the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, it says, Vayavor Avram ba'aretz ad makom Shechem ad Elon Moreh. Where's the first place that Avram came to? It's a place called Shechem, Elon Moreh. What's the mountain right next to Shechem? It's called Hareval. Good. Va'aklani az ba'aretz. Vayera Hashem el Avram vayomer lezaracha etenes aretz azayis v'yivin shal mizbech laHashem hanirei lav. And what does he do? He makes a mizbech on right by Shechem. Right? Where did Yehoshua make his first mizbech in the land of Israel? Hareval, exactly where Avraham Avinu made his first mizbech. Next pasuk. Take Misham Ahara. He went down to the mountain Mikedem, the Beis El. Vayet Aloi Beis El Miyam v'Ha'ai Mikedem. The second place Avraham Avinu visited the land of Israel was Ha'ai, which means when the nation of Israel entered the land of Israel, they are in a certain sense, says Rav Yehuda Kil, who's the author of the Dad Mikra of this particular Sefer in Nach. He says this is a Maaseh Avos Simon Labanim. They are following Avram in a certain reversal, right? Avram Avinu is coming from the north, they're coming from the east, but they go to Ha'ai, where Avram Avinu made his Mizbach, and then they go to Hareval, which is Avram Avinu made his other Mizbach. And I'd like to conclude with the following observation. What was Avram Avinu told? Avram Avinu was told, those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. What did they do at Hareval? As the Torah tells us in Parshas Re'eh, and again in Parshas Kisavai, what are they doing at Hareval? The blessings and the curses. They make the declaration of all the blessings and all the curses. Isn't this exactly the parallel? Meaning Tanakh is now clicking directly into the map that the Torah, the blueprint is now being created. Now they have the map. Now what are we doing in the foundations of the land? They're doing precisely what the Torah said to us. It couldn't be more simple. But if we don't learn Nach, we would never know. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and I appreciate the learning.